When my husband's family told me I would never truly belong in their precious bloodline, they had no idea I was quietly building the fortune that would eventually let me buy their ancestral home right out from under them at a foreclosure auction. What started as subtle whispers about my working-class background and my inability to understand their traditions ended with me holding the deed to the very house where they had spent generations looking down on people like me. This is the story of how being treated as an outsider gave me the motivation to become the insider with all the power. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Mitchell, though for the past 6 years I had been Sarah Hartwell, having taken my husband's name when we married, in what I believed was the beginning of a partnership that would bridge two very different worlds. Looking back now, I realize that even on our wedding day, the signs were there that the Hartwell family had never intended for that bridge to be permanent. The wedding itself had been a beautiful affair, held at the historic Hartwell estate in the rolling hills of Virginia, but even as I walked down the aisle in my grandmother's restored dress, I could feel the weight of disapproving stares from relatives, who had made it clear that I was not what they had envisioned for their golden boy. I had met David Hartwell during my final year at Virginia Tech, where I was studying business administration on a combination of academic scholarships and student loans that represented the sacrifices my family had made to give me opportunities they had never had. David was pursuing his MBA, not because he needed the credentials to advance his career, but because it was expected that Hartwell men would have advanced degrees before joining the family's investment firm. The contrast between our motivations for being there should have told me everything I needed to know about how differently we viewed education, opportunity, and the value of hard work. Our first meeting occurred in the university library during finals week of my senior year, when I was deep into research for my capstone project on sustainable business practices in rural communities. I had claimed a corner table surrounded by stacks of books and research papers, my laptop open to multiple tabs of financial data and case studies. David approached me during one of my late-night study sessions, initially drawn by what he later admitted was curiosity about anyone who could maintain that level of focus and organization during the chaos of exam period. The conversation that followed revealed both the attraction and the fundamental differences that would define our relationship. David was impressed by my work ethic and my passion for creating business solutions that could benefit underserved communities. He spoke about his admiration for people who had to work for their achievements, rather than having opportunities handed to them. At the time, I interpreted his comments as evidence of his progressive thinking, and his rejection of the entitled attitude that often characterized people from his background. What I didn't recognize then was that David's attraction to my determination and independence was based on the novelty of my situation, rather than genuine respect for the values that had shaped my character. He was fascinated by the idea of dating someone who had overcome challenges and built success through personal effort, but he had never seriously considered what it would mean to integrate someone with my background into his family's established social and economic structure. The early months of our relationship were characterized by David's enthusiasm for introducing me to experiences that were routine for him, but completely foreign to my background. He took pride in sharing his knowledge of fine dining, classical music, and art appreciation, approaching these introductions with the patience of someone teaching a willing student about subjects they found genuinely important. His approach was always respectful and encouraging, but there was an underlying assumption that I needed to be educated about the finer things in life in order to become a suitable partner for someone of his social standing. I participated in these cultural education sessions with genuine interest and appreciation, partly because I enjoyed learning about new subjects, and partly because I wanted to understand the world that was so important to David. The art galleries, symphony performances, and exclusive restaurants represented experiences that my family could never have afforded, and I was grateful for the opportunity to expand my horizons. However, I also began to notice that these shared experiences always involved me adapting to David's preferences and standards, rather than him showing interest in the activities and values that had shaped my own character. The first time David visited my family home in the small town of Cedar Ridge, Virginia, the contrast between our backgrounds became starkly apparent in ways that created lasting tension in our relationship. My parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, lived in a modest 3-bedroom house that my father had purchased with his savings from 25 years of working as a machinist at the local manufacturing plant. The house was impeccably maintained through my parents' careful attention and pride in homeownership, but it lacked the architectural grandeur and expensive furnishings that characterized the homes where David had grown up. My parents had prepared for David's visit with the kind of enthusiasm and nervousness that reflected their understanding that this relationship was serious, and that they wanted to make a good impression on someone who was clearly important to their daughter. My mother had spent days planning and preparing a home-cooked meal that showcased her best recipes, and my father had researched David's interests in an effort to find common ground for conversation during the visit. David's behavior during that weekend was polite and respectful, but I could see him struggling to connect with my parents' lifestyle and values. The conversations around our dinner table focused on topics like local community events, my father's work at the plant, and my mother's volunteer activities at the church and school. These were the subjects that animated my parents and reflected their genuine interests and commitments, but they were completely outside David's experience and understanding. The most telling moment of that visit occurred when my father offered to show David his workshop in the garage, where he spent his evenings and weekends building furniture and repairing household items with tools he had collected over decades of careful saving and practical experience. My father's workshop represented his creative outlet and his pride in being able to solve problems and create beautiful things with his hands. But David's response revealed his inability to understand or appreciate the skill and satisfaction that came from manual work and practical creation. While David was polite during the workshop tour, I could see that he viewed my father's activities as hobbies rather than legitimate expressions of craftsmanship and creativity. His questions were superficial, and his interest was clearly forced, creating an uncomfortable dynamic that my father was too gracious to acknowledge but that I could see was disappointing for him. The disconnect between David's world of financial abstractions and investment strategies and my father's world of tangible creation and practical problem-solving highlighted the cultural gap that would continue to challenge our relationship. The visit to my family home also revealed David's assumptions about social mobility and the relationship between education and class status. During our conversations with my parents, David made several comments about how proud he was that I had been able to overcome my background and achieve success through education and hard work. While these comments were intended as compliments, they reflected his belief that my family's lifestyle represented something to be overcome, rather than a foundation of values and experiences that had contributed to my character and capabilities. My parents' reaction to David's comments was characteristically gracious, but I could see that they were puzzled by the implication that their lives and values represented obstacles to my success, rather than sources of strength and guidance. The suggestion that I had needed to escape my background in order to achieve my potential was particularly painful for my mother, who had always emphasized the importance of education and ambition, while maintaining pride in our family's working-class values and community connections. The contrast between David's reaction to my family and my parents' effort to welcome him into their home highlighted the different approaches that our backgrounds had taught us for navigating social differences and building relationships across economic divides. My parents had always taught me to treat people with respect regardless of their financial status or social position, and they extended that same courtesy to David despite the obvious differences in our family circumstances. David's approach to social differences was more complicated, influenced by his family's position in a social hierarchy that valued wealth, education, and cultural sophistication as markers of personal worth and social belonging. While he was never deliberately rude or dismissive, his inability to genuinely connect with my parents' interests and values reflected his limited experience with people outside his social circle, and his unconscious assumption that his family's lifestyle represented a superior way of living. The weekend visit to my family home marked the beginning of a pattern that would continue throughout our relationship, where I was expected to adapt to David's family's expectations and social standards, while he remained largely unchanged by exposure to my background and values. The asymmetrical nature of this cultural exchange should have been a warning sign about how our marriage would develop, but at the time I interpreted David's expectations as reasonable steps toward building a life together that would honor both of our backgrounds. The engagement period that followed our college graduation revealed additional layers of complexity in navigating the relationship between my working-class background and David's family's upper-class expectations. David proposed to me during a carefully planned weekend getaway to the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia, presenting me with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother and carried significant family history and sentimental value. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The proposal itself was romantic and thoughtful, but the family significance of the ring created immediate pressure to honor traditions and expectations that I had not been prepared to navigate. The announcement of our engagement was met with congratulations from my family and friends, who were genuinely excited about my happiness and the opportunities that marriage to David might provide for building a secure and comfortable future. However, the reaction from David's family was more complicated, characterized by polite expressions of happiness that were accompanied by subtle indicators of their concerns about the suitability of our match and their expectations for how I would need to change in order to become an appropriate member of their family. My first formal introduction to the extended Hartwell family occurred during an engagement party that David's mother, Margaret Hartwell, organized at the family estate 6 weeks after our announcement. The event was designed as an opportunity for both families to meet and celebrate our upcoming marriage, but it quickly became apparent that the gathering was structured to highlight the differences between our backgrounds, rather than create genuine connection and understanding between our families. The guest list for the engagement party included dozens of Hartwell family members, family friends, and business associates who represented the social and economic network that had supported the family's success over multiple generations. My family was represented by my parents, my younger brother Michael, and my aunt and uncle who had driven down from Maryland to attend the celebration. The numerical imbalance between the two families created an immediate dynamic where my relatives were clearly outnumbered and somewhat overwhelmed by the scale and formality of the event. Margaret Hartwell's approach to hosting the engagement party revealed her skill at social orchestration and her understanding of how to use social events to communicate messages about family values and expectations. The party was held in the family's formal dining room and adjoining parlor, spaces that showcased the Hartwell family's wealth and taste through antique furniture, original artwork, and architectural details that reflected generations of careful preservation and investment in beautiful surroundings. The menu for the engagement party featured sophisticated cuisine and premium wines that were served by professional catering staff who moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency and discretion. The level of formality and expense represented by the event was intended to demonstrate the family's standards for social entertaining and their expectations for the kind of lifestyle that David and I would be expected to maintain as a married couple. My parents' reaction to the engagement party reflected both their appreciation for the Hartwell family's generosity in hosting such an elaborate celebration and their growing awareness of the economic and social differences that separated our families. They had dressed carefully for the occasion and conducted themselves with the dignity and grace that had always characterized their approach to social situations, but I could see that they were somewhat intimidated by the formality and scale of the event. The conversations that occurred during the engagement party revealed the different ways that the two families approached topics like career aspirations, family planning, and lifestyle priorities. The Hartwell family members and their friends engaged in discussions about investment strategies, travel destinations, and cultural events that reflected their access to financial resources and social opportunities that were far beyond my family's experience. My parents participated in these conversations as politely as possible, but their contributions were limited by their lack of familiarity with the subjects being discussed. More significantly, the engagement party conversations revealed the Hartwell family's assumptions about how my marriage to David would affect my career goals and personal priorities. Several family members made comments about how wonderful it would be for me to be able to focus on supporting David's career and eventually raising children, without the financial pressures that had required me to work throughout college. These comments were intended as expressions of happiness about the security and opportunities that marriage would provide, but they reflected assumptions about gender roles and family structures that were inconsistent with my own goals and values. The suggestion that marriage would free me from the necessity of working and pursuing my own career ambitions was particularly troubling because it misunderstood both my motivations for building professional skills and my personal satisfaction in contributing to meaningful work. I had never viewed my career aspirations as burdens to be escaped, but rather as opportunities to make meaningful contributions to community development and social progress while building financial independence and personal fulfillment. Margaret Hartwell's individual conversations with me during the engagement party provided insight into her specific concerns about my suitability as a daughter-in-law and her expectations for how I would need to adapt to meet the family's standards for social behavior and cultural participation. Her approach was consistently polite and encouraging, But her questions and suggestions revealed her assessment that I would require significant guidance and education in order to successfully navigate the social and cultural obligations that would be part of married life with David. The topics that Margaret emphasized during our conversations included my understanding of proper etiquette for formal social events, my familiarity with the cultural institutions and charitable organizations that were important to the family's social standing, and my willingness to prioritize family obligations and social commitments over personal career interests. Her approach suggested that she viewed my integration into the family as a project that would require careful management and ongoing supervision to ensure successful completion. Margaret's comments about my career in community development revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of both the nature of my work and the values that motivated my professional choices. She characterized my interest in sustainable business practices and rural economic development as admirable but impractical pursuits that would be difficult to maintain, alongside the social and family responsibilities that would be part of married life. Her suggestion that I might consider transitioning to volunteer work with established charitable organizations reflected her assumption that my professional skills would be better utilized in supporting existing institutions rather than developing innovative approaches to community challenges. The most revealing conversation of the engagement party occurred when Margaret pulled me aside to discuss her expectations for my participation in family traditions and social obligations after David and I were married. She explained that the Hartwell family maintained active involvement in several charitable organizations, cultural institutions, and social clubs that required regular attendance at events and ongoing volunteer commitments from family members. Her description of these obligations suggested that they would constitute a significant time commitment that could interfere with my own career development and professional responsibilities. Margaret's explanation of family social obligations also included detailed descriptions of the expectations for hosting family gatherings, maintaining relationships with extended family members, and supporting David's career advancement through appropriate social networking and entertainment activities. The scope and complexity of these expectations suggested that being a Hartwell wife would constitute a full-time occupation that would leave little time or energy for pursuing independent professional goals or personal interests. The implicit message in Margaret's orientation to family expectations was that my successful integration into the Hartwell family would require me to subordinate my own ambitions and interests to the needs and priorities of the family structure. While she never stated this expectation directly, her emphasis on family loyalty and social obligation suggested that individual pursuits and career ambitions would be viewed as selfish or inappropriate if they conflicted with family needs or social commitments. The engagement party concluded with toasts and expressions of happiness about the upcoming wedding, but the event had revealed fundamental tensions between my values and aspirations and the Hartwell family's expectations for how I would fit into their established social and economic structure. The differences that had been highlighted during the party suggested that successful marriage would require me to make significant changes in my priorities and lifestyle, while the Hartwell family remained largely unchanged by my presence in their social circle. The months following the engagement party were characterized by increasingly detailed conversations about wedding planning that revealed additional layers of complexity in navigating the cultural and economic differences between our families. Margaret Hartwell took the lead in organizing the wedding celebration, approaching the project with the same attention to detail and social orchestration that had characterized the engagement party. Her vision for the wedding reflected her understanding of the event as an opportunity to demonstrate the family's social standing and cultural sophistication, while formally introducing me to their extended network of friends and business associates. The scale and expense of Margaret's wedding plans quickly exceeded anything that my family could have contributed financially, creating an uncomfortable dynamic where the Hartwell family was essentially hosting an event that celebrated my marriage to their son, while my family's role was limited to being grateful guests at a celebration they could not afford to influence or modify. The financial imbalance was never discussed directly, but it created an implicit understanding that the wedding would reflect the Hartwell family's preferences and standards, rather than representing a genuine collaboration between the two families. The venue selection process revealed Margaret's priorities for the wedding celebration and her understanding of the symbolic importance of choosing a location that would reflect the family's social position and cultural values. She advocated strongly for holding the ceremony and reception at the historic Hartwell estate, emphasizing the importance of family tradition and the symbolic significance of beginning our married life in the place where David had grown up, and where multiple generations of Hartwell couples had celebrated their weddings. While the estate was undeniably beautiful and would provide a stunning backdrop for the wedding celebration, the decision to hold the event there also ensured that I would be entering into marriage on territory that was entirely controlled by David's family and surrounded by symbols of their history and achievements. The choice eliminated any possibility that the wedding venue might reflect my own background or preferences, instead establishing from the beginning that our married life would be centered around the Hartwell family's traditions and expectations. The guest list discussions for the wedding revealed additional tensions between the two families' social networks and economic circumstances. Margaret's preliminary guest list included hundreds of people who represented the Hartwell family's extensive connections within Virginia's business and social communities. The list included family friends who had known David since childhood, business associates who had relationships with the family investment firm, and social acquaintances who were part of the established network of families that shared similar economic status and cultural backgrounds. My family's contribution to the guest list was significantly smaller, limited by both the size of our extended family and the reality that many of my relatives lived in distant states and would face financial challenges in traveling to Virginia for the wedding celebration. The disparity in guest numbers created another visible reminder of the differences between our family's social networks and financial resources, while also ensuring that the wedding celebration would be dominated by people who were more familiar with David's background than with mine. The discussions about wedding attire and formal wear revealed Margaret's attention to maintaining appropriate standards of elegance and sophistication for the celebration, while also highlighting the financial challenges that formal events created for my family. Margaret's suggestions for bridesmaid dresses, groomsmen attire, and guest clothing expectations reflected her understanding of appropriate formal wear for upscale social events, but they also represented expense levels that were significantly higher than what my family members were accustomed to budgeting for special occasions. The pressure to meet the Hartwell family's standards for wedding attire created stress for my parents, who wanted to participate appropriately in the celebration, but were concerned about the financial impact of purchasing formal clothing that they might never have occasion to wear again. My mother's anxiety about finding an appropriate dress for the mother of the bride reflected her awareness that her usual approach to special occasion clothing would not meet the standards expected for this particular event. The wedding planning process also revealed differences in our family's approaches to celebrating significant life events and the role that community connections played in marking important milestones. The Hartwell family's approach to wedding celebration emphasized formal elegance, sophisticated entertainment, and social networking opportunities that would strengthen business and cultural relationships within their established community. The guest experience was designed to reflect the family's taste and social standing, while providing opportunities for meaningful conversation and relationship building among people who shared similar backgrounds and interests. My family's traditional approach to celebrating weddings emphasized community gathering, multi-generational participation, and informal socializing that created opportunities for extended family members and longtime friends to share stories, reconnect with distant relatives, and build memories that would be treasured for years to come. The differences between these celebration styles reflected different values about the purpose of social gathering and the importance of inclusive community building versus exclusive social networking. The final months before the wedding were characterized by my growing awareness that the celebration being planned would mark not just the beginning of my marriage to David, but also my formal entry into a social and economic world that had very different expectations and values from the community where I had been raised. The wedding would represent my transition from being Sarah Mitchell, the hardworking scholarship student from Cedar Ridge, to becoming Sarah Hartwell, the wife of a successful investment professional and member of an established Virginia family. The first real crack in the foundation of my marriage appeared 3 years after our wedding, when David's younger sister Caroline announced her engagement to James Morrison, a successful attorney whose family owned a prominent law firm in Richmond. The engagement celebration that Margaret organized for Caroline revealed dynamics within the Hartwell family that I had not previously understood, and it forced me to confront the reality that my position within the family hierarchy was far more precarious than I had realized. Caroline's engagement party was held at the country club where the Hartwell family had maintained membership for 4 generations, a venue that represented the pinnacle of social prestige within their community. The event was significantly more elaborate than the celebration that had marked David's and my engagement, featuring a live orchestra, professional floral arrangements, and a guest list that included some of the most influential families in Virginia's business and political circles. The difference in scale and expense between Caroline's engagement celebration and my own was impossible to ignore, but it was the subtle differences in how Margaret presented the two events that revealed the most about her feelings regarding the respective matches. When introducing Caroline and James to guests, Margaret spoke with genuine enthusiasm about the perfect compatibility between the two families, the shared values and traditions that would strengthen their marriage, and the exciting future that lay ahead for the young couple. The contrast with how Margaret had presented David and me during our own engagement party was striking. While she had always been polite and supportive in public, her introduction of us to guests had emphasized David's generosity in choosing love over social convention, and my good fortune in being welcomed into such an established family. The implication that David had made a sacrifice in marrying me while I had simply been lucky to be chosen created a narrative that positioned our marriage as an act of charity rather than a partnership between equals. Caroline's wedding planning process provided additional insight into Margaret's priorities and preferences when she was working with a bride whose background and values aligned perfectly with her own vision for family expansion. The conversations between Margaret and Caroline about venue selection, guest lists, and celebration style were characterized by collaborative enthusiasm and shared excitement about creating an event that would honor family traditions while reflecting the couple's personal preferences. The ease and naturalness of Margaret's relationship with Caroline highlighted the effort and artificiality that had characterized her interactions with me throughout my own wedding planning process. Where Margaret had needed to carefully educate me about family expectations and social protocols, Caroline instinctively understood the unspoken rules and cultural nuances that governed the Hartwell family's approach to social celebration and community engagement. The guest list for Caroline's wedding included many of the same family friends and business associates who had attended my own wedding, but the conversations at Caroline's events revealed a level of comfort and familiarity that had been absent from my own celebration. The guests seemed genuinely excited about Caroline's marriage in ways that suggested their approval of the match and their confidence that the union would strengthen rather than complicate the family's social and business relationships. During the months of Caroline's wedding planning, I began to notice changes in how family members interacted with me during social gatherings and family events. The conversations that had previously included me in discussions about family business and social planning began to exclude me more frequently, with family members engaging in detailed conversations about topics that assumed knowledge and relationships that I did not possess. The exclusion was never overt or deliberately rude, but it reflected a growing assumption that my interests and opinions were not relevant to important family decisions and social planning. David's response to my concerns about these changing dynamics was to suggest that I was being overly sensitive, and that the family's focus on Caroline's wedding was naturally creating temporary shifts in attention and conversation topics. David's dismissive response to my observations about family dynamics should have been a clearer warning sign about his own priorities and loyalties, but I chose to interpret his reaction as evidence of his discomfort with family conflict, rather than his unwillingness to advocate for my position within the family structure. His suggestion that I was imagining problems where none existed reflected his inability or unwillingness to acknowledge the subtle but persistent ways that his family had never fully accepted me as a legitimate member of their social circle. The wedding ceremony itself was a magnificent celebration that showcased the Hartwell family's ability to orchestrate events that honored tradition while creating memorable experiences for their guests. Caroline was a radiant bride who clearly felt supported and celebrated by everyone in attendance, and the joy that surrounded her marriage created a stark contrast with the underlying tensions and reservations that had characterized my own wedding celebration. During the reception, I found myself observing the interactions between family members and wedding guests, with new awareness of the social dynamics that I had previously missed or misunderstood. The conversations between Margaret and other family matriarchs revealed their satisfaction with Caroline's marriage and their confidence that the union would maintain and strengthen the family's social position and cultural values. The contrast between the wholehearted family approval that surrounded Caroline's marriage and the qualified acceptance that had greeted my own union with David became impossible to ignore during the wedding celebration. While no one made direct comparisons or inappropriate comments, the enthusiasm and confidence that characterized the family's response to Caroline's wedding highlighted the reservations and concerns that had underlain their response to my marriage. The months following Caroline's wedding were marked by a gradual but noticeable shift in family dynamics that reflected the changing balance of relationships and influences within the Hartwell family structure. Caroline's marriage to James brought into the family circle another couple whose background and values aligned perfectly with established family traditions, creating a natural alliance that strengthened the traditional elements within the family while potentially isolating those who represented departure from established norms. James Morrison's integration into the family was seamless in ways that highlighted the ongoing challenges I faced in finding my place within the Hartwell social structure. His understanding of business practices, social conventions, and cultural expectations allowed him to participate naturally in family conversations and decision-making processes, without requiring the explanation and education that had characterized my own integration process. The ease with which James assumed his place within the family structure created additional pressure for me to prove my value and belonging through increased efforts to understand and participate in family traditions and social obligations. However, my attempts to demonstrate my commitment to family values and cultural participation often felt forced and artificial in comparison to the natural comfort that characterized James and Caroline's relationship with family expectations. David's response to the changing family dynamics reflected his growing comfort with returning to established patterns of family interaction that did not require him to advocate for my inclusion or defend my perspectives when they differed from traditional family approaches. His relief at being able to participate in family conversations without navigating the complications created by my different background became increasingly apparent in his behavior at family gatherings and social events. The fourth year of our marriage brought additional challenges when David received a promotion within the family investment firm that required him to take on greater responsibilities for client relationships and business development activities. The demands of his new position included extensive travel, irregular hours, and increased participation in social and professional networking events that were essential for maintaining and expanding the firm's client base. David's professional advancement represented the natural progression of his career within the family business, but it also created new pressures and expectations that affected our marriage in ways that I had not anticipated. The clients and business associates who were most important to the firm's success expected David to maintain certain social and cultural standards that reflected the family's established reputation for sophistication and exclusivity. The social obligations that accompanied David's promotion included attendance at exclusive cultural events, participation in prestigious charity functions, and membership in organizations that served as networking opportunities for the region's business and social elite. These activities required a level of cultural knowledge and social comfort that David possessed naturally, but that remained challenging for me despite years of effort to understand and adapt to the expectations of his social circle. More significantly, David's increased responsibilities created new expectations for my own participation in social and professional activities that would support his career advancement and strengthen his relationships with important clients and business partners. The role of a successful investment professional's wife included specific obligations for entertaining clients, supporting charitable organizations, and maintaining relationships with the spouses of other professionals within the financial services community. The pressure to excel in these social and professional support roles created additional stress in our marriage, particularly because my own career in community development often conflicted with the time and energy requirements of supporting David's advancement within the family firm. The expectation that I would prioritize his career needs over my own professional obligations reflected assumptions about gender roles and family priorities that were inconsistent with my own values and aspirations. Margaret's involvement in defining my social obligations as David's wife became more direct and prescriptive, as his position within the firm became more prominent and visible within the community. Her guidance about appropriate charitable involvement, social entertaining standards, and cultural participation reflected her understanding of the specific requirements for maintaining the family's reputation and social standing within their established network. The charitable organizations that Margaret recommended for my involvement were well-established institutions that served important community needs, but operated according to traditional approaches that emphasized volunteer service over innovative program development or systemic change initiatives. My preference for community development work that addressed root causes of social and economic challenges often conflicted with the more conservative approaches favored by the organizations where my participation was expected. The tension between my professional interests in sustainable community development and my social obligations to support traditional charitable institutions created ongoing conflict about how to allocate my time and energy in ways that would honor both my personal values and my responsibilities as a member of the Hartwell family. David's expectation that I would prioritize family social obligations over my own career development reflected his assumption that my professional work was less important than his own career advancement. The entertaining obligations that accompanied David's promotion required me to develop skills in formal dinner party hosting, cultural event planning, and sophisticated menu development that were far beyond my previous experience or natural interests. Margaret's guidance in these areas was comprehensive and well-intentioned, but it also reinforced the message that my own background and preferences were inadequate for meeting the standards expected of David's wife. The guest list for the entertaining events that I was expected to host included clients and business associates whose cultural and social expectations reflected lifestyles and values that were significantly different from my own background and experience. The conversations at these events focused on topics like international travel, investment strategies, and cultural activities that required knowledge and perspectives that I was still developing, despite years of effort to understand David's social circle. My discomfort with these entertaining obligations was compounded by the realization that the clients and business associates who attended our events evaluated not only David's professional capabilities, but also my suitability as a representative of the family firm's values and social standing. The pressure to perform successfully in these social evaluations created anxiety that affected my ability to enjoy the events and build genuine relationships with the people who were important to David's career. The 5th year of our marriage brought a crisis that would fundamentally change the trajectory of our relationship and force me to confront the reality that my position within the Hartwell family was far more vulnerable than I had understood. The crisis began when David's uncle Robert, who had served as managing partner of the family investment firm, announced his intention to retire and transition leadership responsibilities to the next generation of family members. The succession planning process for the investment firm revealed family dynamics and decision-making structures that had been largely hidden from me during the previous years of our marriage. The discussions about leadership transition involved detailed consideration of each family member's qualifications, commitment to family values, and ability to maintain the firm's reputation and client relationships according to established standards of excellence. David's candidacy for advancement within the firm's leadership structure was evaluated not only on his professional capabilities and business development success but also on his personal circumstances and family relationships that would affect his ability to represent the firm appropriately within the community. The evaluation process included consideration of spouses and family members who would be expected to participate in social and professional activities that were essential for maintaining client relationships and community standing. Margaret's role in the succession planning discussions included providing assessments of family members' spouses and their suitability for the increased social and professional obligations that would accompany leadership positions within the firm. Her evaluation of my qualifications and potential for representing the family firm in community leadership roles revealed her ongoing concerns about my background and my ability to meet the sophisticated social expectations that were required for the firm's continued success. The concerns that Margaret expressed about my suitability for increased family responsibility focused on my limited experience with the cultural institutions and social organizations that were most important to the firm's client base. Her assessment emphasized my good intentions and ongoing efforts to understand family expectations, but it also highlighted my continued discomfort with formal social situations and my preference for community development work over traditional charitable involvement. More significantly, Margaret's evaluation included observations about my influence on David's priorities and decision-making that suggested concern about my commitment to family traditions and business practices that had been successful for multiple generations. Her assessment implied that my different background and values might encourage David to pursue directions that could potentially compromise the firm's established reputation and client relationships. The succession planning discussions also revealed that other family members shared Margaret's concerns about my integration into the family structure and my potential impact on family unity and business continuity. The conversations that David reported from these family meetings suggested that my outsider status had become a factor in evaluating his qualifications for leadership roles within the family business. David's response to the family concerns about my suitability for increased social and professional responsibilities was to suggest that I needed to make greater efforts to understand and embrace family traditions and social obligations. His recommendations included increasing my involvement in traditional charitable organizations, developing closer relationships with other family members' spouses, and reducing my commitment to community development work that was viewed as peripheral to family priorities. The pressure to conform more completely to family expectations in order to support David's career advancement forced me to confront the reality that my individual identity and professional aspirations were viewed as obstacles to family harmony and business success. The suggestion that I needed to abandon or significantly reduce my own career interests in order to become a more suitable representative of family values represented a fundamental rejection of the person I had worked so hard to become. The 6 months that followed the succession planning discussions were characterized by increasingly tense conversations between David and me about family obligations, personal priorities, and the future direction of our marriage. David's expectation that I would enthusiastically embrace the changes necessary to support his advancement within the family firm conflicted with my own sense of integrity and personal autonomy. The specific changes that David requested included transitioning from full-time community development work to part-time consulting that would allow greater flexibility for family social obligations, accepting Margaret's guidance about appropriate charitable involvement without questioning or modifying her recommendations, and participating more actively in cultural and social activities that were important to family clients and business associates. While these requests were presented as temporary adjustments necessary for supporting David's career transition, the underlying expectation was that I would permanently modify my priorities and interests to align more closely with traditional family values and social expectations. The presumption that my own professional goals and personal values were negotiable in ways that David's career aspirations were not reflected assumptions about gender roles and family hierarchy that I found increasingly difficult to accept. My resistance to making the requested changes created ongoing tension in our marriage that began to affect our daily interactions and long-term planning discussions. David's frustration with my unwillingness to fully embrace family expectations was matched by my own growing resentment about the constant pressure to abandon or minimize aspects of my identity that were fundamental to my sense of purpose and personal satisfaction. The most difficult conversation occurred when David suggested that we might want to postpone starting a family until I had successfully transitioned into a more traditional role within the family structure. His concern that my current priorities and professional commitments would interfere with my ability to raise children according to family standards revealed his assumption that motherhood would require me to completely abandon my career interests and personal autonomy. The implication that I would need to prove my suitability as a family member before being trusted with the responsibility of raising the next generation of Hartwell children was profoundly hurtful, and reflected the extent to which I was still viewed as an outsider whose influence needed to be carefully controlled and monitored. The suggestion that my values and perspectives might have negative effects on children raised within the family structure was particularly painful, because it rejected not only my individual contributions but also the working-class values and community-centered perspectives that had shaped my character. The crisis that would ultimately precipitate the most significant changes in my marriage occurred during the firm's annual Client Appreciation event, a sophisticated gathering that served as the social highlight of the business year and provided opportunities for strengthening relationships with the most important clients and community leaders. The event was held at an exclusive resort in the Blue Ridge Mountains and included 3 days of social activities, cultural programs, and business discussions that were designed to reinforce the firm's reputation for excellence and sophistication. My preparation for the Client Appreciation event included extensive consultation with Margaret about appropriate attire, social expectations, and conversation topics that would be suitable for the various activities and dining events that comprised the weekend program. The level of detail and preparation required for successful participation in the event highlighted the complexity of the social obligations that were considered essential for supporting the family business. The first day of the event proceeded according to plan, with David and me participating in various social activities and business conversations that allowed us to interact with important clients and their spouses in relaxed and enjoyable settings. My conversations with client spouses revealed shared interests in community development and social advocacy that created natural connections, and suggested that my background might actually be an asset in building authentic relationships with people who valued substance over superficial social conventions. However, the crisis occurred during the second evening's formal dinner, when a conversation about regional economic development revealed fundamental differences between my perspectives on sustainable community growth and the investment strategies that were most profitable for the family firm. The discussion began innocuously enough, with questions about my community development background and my observations about economic trends in rural Virginia communities. My responses to these questions reflected my genuine expertise and passionate commitment to creating economic opportunities that would benefit working-class families and strengthen local communities, rather than extracting wealth for the benefit of outside investors. The specific examples I provided of successful community development initiatives emphasized the importance of local ownership, sustainable business practices, and economic models that prioritized community benefit over maximum profit extraction. The increasingly uncomfortable silence that greeted my comments about sustainable economic development revealed that my perspectives were not only different from, but potentially threatening to, the business philosophy that guided the family firm's investment decisions. The clients who had been engaging in friendly conversation about community development gradually withdrew from the discussion, as it became apparent that my views represented implicit criticism of investment practices that prioritized profit maximization over community benefit. David's response to the situation was to attempt to redirect the conversation towards safer topics, but the damage had already been done in terms of revealing the fundamental incompatibility between my values and the business practices that supported the lifestyle and social position that the Hartwell family had built over multiple generations. The tension that remained throughout the rest of the evening reflected the recognition that my community development work was not merely different from family business interests, but potentially opposed to them. The aftermath of the client appreciation event included difficult conversations with David about my future participation in business-related social activities, and the appropriateness of discussing my professional work in settings where clients and business associates might interpret my comments as criticism of investment industry practices. David's concern that my community development perspectives might create confusion or discomfort among important clients reflected his growing awareness that my values represented a fundamental challenge to family business philosophy. Margaret's response to reports about the client event included direct conversations with me about the importance of supporting family business interests through appropriate social behavior and careful communication that would not undermine client confidence or create unnecessary controversy. Her guidance emphasized the need for family members to present a unified approach to economic and social issues that would reinforce rather than complicate the family's business relationships. The suggestion that I should avoid discussing my professional work or personal values in social settings where they might conflict with family business interests represented a fundamental request that I suppress essential aspects of my identity in order to maintain social harmony in business relationships. The expectation that I would prioritize business considerations over authentic communication and genuine relationship building reflected assumptions about the relative importance of individual integrity versus family loyalty that I found increasingly difficult to accept. The 7th year of our marriage brought the event that would ultimately catalyze the most significant changes in my relationship with the Hartwell family and force me to make decisions about my future that would determine whether I could maintain my integrity while remaining part of their social and economic structure. The catalyst came in the form of an inheritance that I received from my great-aunt Helen, a woman who had worked as a seamstress for 50 years and had invested her modest savings with remarkable skill and patience. Aunt Helen had been the family member who had most strongly encouraged my educational aspirations and career development, providing both emotional support and occasional financial assistance during my college years, when scholarships and student loans were insufficient to cover all expenses. Her belief in my potential and her pride in my achievements had provided crucial encouragement during periods when I had doubted my ability to succeed in environments where my background created obvious disadvantages. The inheritance that Aunt Helen left me was not enormous by Hartwell family standards, but it represented a substantial sum that reflected decades of careful saving and intelligent investment decisions that had allowed her to accumulate wealth despite her modest income. More importantly, the inheritance came with no restrictions or expectations about how the money should be used, providing me with financial independence and decision-making autonomy that I had never previously possessed. The notification about Aunt Helen's inheritance arrived during a period when tensions between David and me about family expectations and personal priorities had reached a critical point. The money represented not only financial resources but also symbolic validation of the working-class values and community-centered perspectives that had shaped my character and professional aspirations. Aunt Helen's success in building wealth through careful planning and intelligent decision-making demonstrated that financial security could be achieved without abandoning personal values or compromising individual integrity. David's response to news of my inheritance revealed assumptions about marital property and financial decision-making that highlighted ongoing issues about autonomy and equality within our relationship. His immediate expectation that the inheritance would be integrated into our joint financial planning and used to support shared goals reflected his assumption that individual resources automatically became family assets regardless of their source or the intentions of the person who had provided them. The conversations that followed about how to manage and invest my inheritance revealed fundamental differences in our approaches to financial planning and our understanding of individual versus joint decision-making authority within marriage. David's recommendation that the money be invested according to strategies developed by the family firm reflected his assumption that professional expertise should override personal preferences and that family-business relationships should be prioritized over individual financial autonomy. My preference for investing the inheritance in ways that aligned with my own values and supported community development initiatives that I considered important created the first major financial disagreement of our marriage. The conflict revealed that David had never seriously considered the possibility that I might have investment goals and priorities that differed from family business philosophy and established wealth management practices. The inheritance also provided me with the financial resources necessary to pursue professional opportunities and personal interests that had previously been limited by economic constraints and family obligation pressures. The money offered the possibility of reducing my dependence on David's income and family support systems, while creating opportunities for building career independence and personal autonomy that would allow me to make decisions based on my own values rather than family expectations. The most significant opportunity that the inheritance created was the possibility of starting my own community development consulting practice that would allow me to work directly with rural communities and small businesses that needed assistance with sustainable economic planning and business development strategies. The financial independence that the inheritance provided would allow me to accept clients and projects based on their potential for community benefit rather than their ability to provide immediate financial returns. David's reaction to my interest in using the inheritance to support independent career development revealed his underlying assumptions about my professional aspirations and their relative importance compared to family obligations and social expectations. His concern that starting my own business would interfere with my ability to fulfill family social obligations reflected his expectation that my career interests would always remain secondary to supporting his advancement within the family firm. Margaret's response to my inheritance and my plans for using the money to support career independence included direct conversations about the importance of consulting with family financial advisors before making major investment decisions. Her emphasis on the value of professional guidance reflected her concern that my lack of experience with substantial financial resources might lead to poor decisions that could compromise my future security and family financial stability. The suggestion that I should rely on family expertise rather than developing my own financial knowledge and decision-making capabilities reflected ongoing assumptions about my competence and autonomy that had characterized family interactions throughout my marriage. The expectation that I would defer to family authority, even regarding resources that I had inherited independently, suggested that true equality and autonomy within the family structure would never be possible regardless of my personal achievements or financial circumstances. the decision to use my inheritance to launch an independent community development consulting practice marked the beginning of the most transformative period of my adult life, but it also created the conditions that would expose the true nature of my relationship with the Hartwell family and force me to confront realities that I had been avoiding for years. The process of establishing my own business required me to develop new skills, build professional networks outside the Hartwell social circle, and make decisions based on my own judgment rather than family expectations and established traditions. My first step in building an independent consulting practice was to conduct market research that would help me understand the specific needs and challenges facing rural Virginia communities that could benefit from professional business development assistance. The research process took me into small towns and rural areas throughout central and southwestern Virginia, where I conducted interviews with local business owners, community leaders, and economic development officials who were working to address persistent challenges related to economic diversification and sustainable growth. The communities that I visited during my research phase were struggling with economic transitions that required creative solutions and innovative approaches to business development and community planning. Many of these areas had been dependent on traditional industries like agriculture, manufacturing, and natural resource extraction that were facing significant challenges due to technological changes, global competition, and shifting market conditions that made traditional economic strategies less viable. The business owners and community leaders that I interviewed expressed genuine enthusiasm for working with someone who understood both the practical challenges of rural economic development and the sophisticated business planning techniques that could help them develop sustainable strategies for growth and diversification. Their willingness to share detailed information about their situations and their openness to exploring new approaches to community development reflected their recognition that traditional solutions were inadequate for addressing the complex challenges they faced. The market research process also revealed that many rural communities had difficulty accessing professional business development services because established consulting firms typically focused on urban markets and larger businesses that could afford premium service fees. The gap between community needs and available professional services represented a significant opportunity for building a successful practice that could provide meaningful assistance while generating sufficient income to support independent operation. More importantly, the research confirmed that my educational background, professional experience, and personal values were well suited for the type of community development work that these areas needed most urgently. The combination of business planning expertise and genuine commitment to community benefit that characterized my approach was exactly what local leaders had been seeking, but had been unable to find through traditional consulting channels. The process of developing my business plan and establishing operational procedures for my consulting practice required me to make decisions about service offerings, pricing strategies, and client development approaches that reflected my own priorities and values rather than external expectations about appropriate professional behavior. The freedom to design my practice according to my own judgment was both exhilarating and challenging, requiring me to develop confidence in my decision-making abilities and trust in my professional expertise. David's response to my business development activities revealed his discomfort with my increasing independence and his concern about how my professional activities might affect our social standing within the established community networks that were important to his career advancement. His questions about my client selection criteria and service pricing reflected his assumption that my business decisions should be evaluated according to their potential impact on family reputation rather than their effectiveness in serving community needs. The tension that developed around my business planning process highlighted fundamental differences in our approaches to professional success and personal satisfaction that had been obscured by the financial security and social expectations that had characterized our married life. David's definition of professional achievement emphasized financial returns, social prestige, and integration with established business networks, while my approach prioritized community benefit, authentic relationship building, and meaningful contribution to social and economic progress. Margaret's reaction to my business development plans included detailed questions about my client base and the types of communities that would be served through my consulting practice. Her concerns focused on the appropriateness of working with rural communities and small businesses that might not reflect the sophisticated standards and cultural values that were important to maintaining family social standing within established networks. The implication that my choice to work with working-class communities and small business owners represented a step down from the social and professional standards that were expected of family members reflected assumptions about class hierarchy and social value that I found increasingly problematic. The suggestion that my professional work should be evaluated based on the social status of my clients rather than the quality and effectiveness of my services challenged my fundamental beliefs about human dignity and professional responsibility. The first major client that I secured for my consulting practice was the town of Millbrook, Virginia, a community of approximately 3,000 people that was seeking assistance with economic diversification planning following the closure of a textile manufacturing plant that had been the area's largest employer for more than 40 years. The plant closure had eliminated nearly 400 jobs and created an economic crisis that required innovative approaches to attracting new businesses and supporting existing enterprises that could provide sustainable employment opportunities. The mayor of Millbrook, Patricia Williams, was a retired teacher who had been elected to office specifically to lead the community's response to the economic challenges created by the plant closure. Her background in education and her deep understanding of community needs made her an ideal partner for developing comprehensive strategies that could address both immediate employment needs and long-term economic sustainability goals. My initial consultation with Mayor Williams and the town council revealed that Millbrook possessed several assets that could serve as foundations for economic development initiatives, including a strategic location near major transportation corridors, a skilled workforce with strong work ethic and community commitment, and affordable real estate that could be attractive to businesses seeking cost-effective operational facilities. However, the community also faced significant challenges that would need to be addressed through coordinated planning and strategic investment, including limited access to capital for business development, inadequate technology infrastructure for modern business operations, and a lack of marketing and promotional capabilities that would be necessary for attracting new businesses and supporting existing enterprises. The comprehensive economic development plan that I developed for Millbrook included specific strategies for addressing each of these challenges through a combination of local initiatives, state and federal program participation, and private sector partnerships that could provide resources and expertise without compromising community autonomy or long-term sustainability goals. The business attraction component of the plan focused on identifying companies and industries that would be compatible with Millbrook's workforce capabilities and community values while providing employment opportunities that could offer decent wages and career advancement potential. The strategy emphasized manufacturing and service businesses that could benefit from the community's location and workforce characteristics while contributing to local economic stability and growth. The small business development component included programs for supporting existing local enterprises and encouraging entrepreneurship among community members who had business ideas and management capabilities but lacked access to capital and professional development resources. The strategy included partnerships with regional banking institutions and state economic development agencies that could provide financing and technical assistance for qualifying businesses. The infrastructure development component addressed the need for technology improvements, transportation enhancements, and facility upgrades that would be necessary for supporting business growth and attracting new enterprises to the community. The plan included strategies for financing these improvements through a combination of local resources, grant funding, and public-private partnerships that could provide necessary capabilities without creating unsustainable financial obligations. The success of my work with Millbrook created opportunities for additional client relationships with other rural communities that were facing similar economic challenges and needed professional assistance with developing comprehensive strategies for sustainable growth and development. Word-of-mouth referrals from satisfied clients began generating inquiries from mayors, economic development officials, and business leaders throughout Central Virginia who were interested in working with someone who understood their specific needs and constraints. The growing success of my consulting practice provided validation that my professional skills and community development expertise were valued by clients who needed the services that I could provide most effectively. The positive feedback that I received from community leaders and business owners confirmed that my decision to pursue independent practice had been sound, and that my work was making meaningful contributions to economic development and community sustainability. However, the increasing demands of my consulting practice also created new tensions in my marriage, as David expressed concern about the time and energy that I was devoting to professional activities that took me away from home and family obligations with increasing frequency. His expectation that my business activities would remain secondary to family social commitments reflected his assumption that my career independence was a temporary phase that would eventually give way to more traditional priorities and family-centered responsibilities. The conflict between my professional obligations and family social expectations came to a head during the annual Hartwell family reunion, a 3-day gathering that brought together extended family members for a celebration that combined social activities with business discussions and family decision-making meetings. The reunion was held at the family estate and included dozens of relatives, family friends, and business associates who participated in formal dinners, recreational activities, and traditional ceremonies that reinforced family bonds and cultural continuity. My attendance at the family reunion required me to cancel client meetings and postpone project deadlines in ways that created inconvenience for communities that were depending on my assistance with time-sensitive economic development initiatives. The expectation that family social obligations would automatically take precedence over professional commitments reflected assumptions about my priorities and values that were increasingly inconsistent with my actual beliefs and responsibilities. During the reunion, I found myself participating in conversations about family business activities and social events, while simultaneously managing phone calls and email communications with clients who needed immediate assistance with various aspects of their economic development projects. The multitasking required to fulfill both family and professional obligations created stress and prevented me from being fully present for either set of responsibilities. The most significant tension during the family reunion occurred during a formal dinner, where extended family members and business associates engaged in detailed discussions about investment strategies and economic development policies that reflected perspectives that were often directly opposed to the community-centered approaches that guided my own professional work. The conversation included criticism of government programs and regulatory policies that supported the types of community development initiatives that were central to my consulting practice. My attempts to contribute alternative perspectives to these discussions were met with polite but dismissive responses that made it clear that my professional expertise and community development experience were not considered relevant to serious conversations about economic policy and investment strategy. The implicit message was that my work with rural communities and small businesses was well-intentioned but naive compared to the sophisticated understanding of economic dynamics that characterized family business philosophy. The dismissive response to my professional perspectives during family conversations reflected broader assumptions about the relative value and importance of different types of economic activity and community development work. The suggestion that my community-focused approach was less sophisticated or effective than investment strategies that prioritized profit maximization revealed fundamental differences in values and priorities that could not be reconciled through better communication or mutual understanding. David's response to my discomfort with family conversations about economic development included suggestions that I should avoid discussing my professional work in settings where it might create controversy or confusion among family members and business associates who had different perspectives on appropriate economic policy and development strategies. His recommendation that I focus on social conversation topics rather than professional issues reflected his assumption that my work was less important than maintaining family harmony and business relationships. The expectation that I should suppress my professional identity and expertise in order to avoid challenging family business philosophy represented a fundamental rejection of my individual contributions and the community development values that were central to my sense of purpose and personal integrity. The suggestion that my work was appropriate for external clients but inappropriate for family discussion reflected assumptions about hierarchy and importance that I found increasingly unacceptable. The months following the family reunion were characterized by my growing awareness that my professional success and personal independence were creating increasing tension within my marriage and my relationship with the Hartwell family structure. The financial independence that my consulting practice was generating reduced my dependence on family approval and support, while creating opportunities for making decisions based on my own values rather than external expectations and obligations. The confidence that I had developed through building a successful business and serving clients who valued my expertise provided a foundation for questioning assumptions and expectations that I had previously accepted without sufficient examination. The positive feedback that I received from community leaders and business owners who benefited from my services offered validation that was independent of family approval and social acceptance within established networks. More importantly, the financial success of my consulting practice was providing resources that could support increased independence and autonomy in ways that would fundamentally change the power dynamics within my marriage and my relationship with the Hartwell family. The money that I was earning through my own professional efforts belonged entirely to me and could be used to support decisions and priorities that reflected my own values rather than family expectations and social obligations. The realization that I possessed both the financial resources and professional capabilities necessary for complete independence created new possibilities for evaluating my marriage and family relationships based on their contribution to my happiness and personal fulfillment, rather than their necessity for my economic security and social acceptance. The foundation of autonomy that my business success was creating would prove essential for making decisions about my future that prioritized authentic relationship and mutual respect over social convention and family tradition. The turning point that would fundamentally alter my perspective on my marriage and my relationship with the Hartwell family occurred during a routine client meeting that revealed information about family business activities that I had not previously understood. The revelation came through a conversation with Tom Bradley, the Economic Development Director for Augusta County, who had contacted me about providing consulting services for a rural business development initiative that was seeking professional assistance with strategic planning and implementation. During our initial consultation meeting, Tom mentioned that his office had been working with several investment firms on economic development projects throughout the region, including partnerships with established Virginia companies that were interested in expanding their operations into rural markets. His description of these partnerships included detailed information about investment strategies and business development approaches that were being used to support economic growth in communities throughout central and southwestern Virginia. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Tom began describing a specific investment initiative that involved the acquisition and redevelopment of rural properties for commercial and residential purposes that would serve markets in Richmond and other urban areas. His description of the investment strategy included details about property acquisition methods, development planning processes, and marketing approaches that were designed to maximize returns for investors while providing limited benefits for existing rural communities. The investment firm that Tom identified as the lead organizer for this rural property development initiative was Hartwell Investment Management, the family business where David worked and where he had been advancing toward leadership responsibilities. The revelation that the family firm was involved in rural property development activities that prioritized investor returns over community benefit created immediate concern about the potential conflict between my community development work and my husband's business activities. Tom's description of the Hartwell firm's rural development strategy included specific examples of property acquisitions and development projects that had been implemented in communities where I was currently providing consulting services, or had been approached about potential client relationships. The geographic overlap between my consulting practice and the family firm's investment activities created potential conflicts of interest that could compromise my ability to serve clients effectively while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. More troubling was Tom's description of the community impact assessment that his office had conducted regarding the Hartwell firm's development projects in rural areas. The assessment indicated that while the developments provided some economic benefits through construction employment and increased property tax revenues, they also contributed to housing cost increases and commercial displacement that made it more difficult for existing residents to maintain affordable living situations and local business operations. The specific examples that Tom provided included several communities where the Hartwell firm's development activities had contributed to gentrification pressures that displaced longtime residents and changed community character in ways that conflicted with local preferences and economic sustainability goals. The development projects prioritized attracting suburban residents and commercial enterprises that served regional markets rather than supporting existing community businesses and maintaining affordable housing for local workforce populations. The revelation that my husband's family business was implementing development strategies that were potentially harmful to the types of communities that I was working to support through my consulting practice created both professional and personal dilemmas that required immediate attention and careful consideration. The conflict between my professional responsibilities and my family business connections threatened to compromise my credibility with current and potential clients while creating ethical concerns about the appropriateness of my continuing involvement in community development work. Tom's offer to provide additional information about the Hartwell firm's rural development activities included access to public records and economic impact analyses that would allow me to understand the full scope of their regional activities and their effects on communities where I had professional relationships and responsibilities. The information would enable me to assess the extent of potential conflicts and develop appropriate strategies for managing ethical concerns while protecting my professional reputation and client relationships. The decision to request detailed information about the family firm's rural development activities represented a significant step toward investigating business practices that directly affected my professional work and personal integrity. The choice to seek factual information about activities that involved both my husband's career and my own professional responsibilities reflected my commitment to making informed decisions based on accurate understanding rather than assumptions or incomplete information. The documentation that Tom provided about the Hartwell firm's rural development projects revealed a comprehensive strategy for acquiring undervalued rural properties and converting them to residential and commercial uses that would serve suburban markets and regional economic development goals. The strategy included partnerships with local economic development agencies and state government programs that provided incentives and support for development projects that met specific criteria for job creation and tax revenue generation. However, the detailed analysis of community impact indicated that the development projects were contributing to economic and social changes that made it more difficult for existing rural communities to maintain their character and economic sustainability. The projects attracted new residents and businesses that increased housing costs and commercial competition in ways that displaced longtime community members and traditional local enterprises. The property acquisition methods that the firm used to secure development sites included approaches that took advantage of economic distress and limited market knowledge among rural property owners who were facing financial difficulties or estate settlement situations. The acquisition strategy prioritized obtaining properties at below-market prices through negotiations that emphasized quick closing and cash payment capabilities, rather than maximizing compensation for sellers who were often unfamiliar with property values and development potential. The development planning process that the firm employed emphasized maximizing density and commercial value through design approaches that were inconsistent with existing community character and environmental sustainability goals. The projects included residential subdivisions and commercial centers that required infrastructure improvements and environmental modifications that changed community landscape and character in ways that existing residents found problematic and disruptive. The marketing strategies that the firm used to attract residents and businesses to rural development projects emphasized convenience and affordability compared to urban alternatives, rather than integration with existing community culture and economic structures. The marketing approach attracted suburban residents who were seeking rural lifestyle benefits without necessarily understanding or respecting traditional community values and social relationships. The comprehensive picture of the family firm's rural development activities that emerged from Tom's documentation revealed business practices that were directly opposed to the community-centered development approaches that guided my own consulting work. The firm's strategy prioritized investor returns and regional economic growth over community autonomy and sustainable development goals that were central to my professional values and ethical commitments. The realization that my husband's career advancement was dependent on business practices that undermined the communities and values that I was working to support through my professional activities created a fundamental conflict that could not be resolved through compromise or better communication. The business philosophy that guided the family firm's rural development strategy was incompatible with my professional ethics and personal values in ways that made continued support for David's career advancement impossible without compromising my own integrity. The evidence of systematic conflict between my professional responsibilities and my husband's business activities forced me to confront the reality that our marriage was based on assumptions about compatibility and shared values that were fundamentally incorrect. The success of David's career required business practices that were harmful to the communities and people that I was committed to serving through my professional work. The investigation into the family firm's business practices also revealed additional information about their regional activities and long-term strategic goals that had implications for my own consulting practice and professional relationships. The documentation that Tom provided included details about the firm's plans for expanding their rural development activities into areas where I was currently working with clients and communities that depended on my assistance with economic development planning. The potential for direct conflict between my consulting work and the family firm's expansion plans created urgent need for making decisions about my professional future and my relationship with clients who were vulnerable to displacement and economic disruption through development activities that I could not prevent or modify. The ethical responsibility to protect client interests required me to consider whether continued involvement in community development work was appropriate, given my connection to business activities that could harm the communities I was committed to serving. The personal implications of discovering systematic opposition between my professional values and my husband's business activities extended beyond immediate ethical concerns to fundamental questions about the compatibility of our marriage and our ability to build a future based on mutual respect and shared commitment to community benefit. The revelation that David's professional success was dependent on business practices that I found morally objectionable created relationship tensions that could not be resolved through traditional approaches to marital problem solving. The financial independence that my consulting practice had provided became crucial for enabling me to make decisions about my professional and personal future based on ethical considerations rather than economic necessity or family pressure. The money that I had earned through my own work provided the foundation for considering options that would protect my professional integrity while addressing the relationship conflicts that had been revealed through my investigation of family business practices. The strength that I had developed through building a successful consulting practice and serving clients who valued my expertise provided the confidence necessary for confronting difficult truths about my marriage and making decisions that would prioritize authentic relationship and ethical responsibility over social convention and family expectation. The professional capabilities that I had developed would prove essential for navigating the challenges that lay ahead as I worked to resolve the conflicts between my personal values and family obligations in ways that would preserve my integrity while protecting the communities and clients who depended on my continued assistance and support. The confrontation with David about his family's business practices came 3 days after my meeting with Tom Bradley, and it marked the point of no return in our marriage. I approached the conversation with careful preparation, armed with documentation about the rural development projects and their impact on communities I had been serving. David's initial response was defensive anger, claiming I had no right to investigate his family's business activities and questioning my loyalty to our marriage. His attempt to frame my ethical concerns as betrayal revealed everything I needed to know about his priorities and values. When I presented specific examples of how the firm's developments had displaced families in Millbrook and other communities where I worked, David's response was to justify these outcomes as necessary components of economic progress. His dismissal of community displacement as an acceptable cost of development confirmed that we held fundamentally incompatible views about human dignity and social responsibility. The conversation escalated when David accused me of sabotaging his career advancement by investigating family business practices. His expectation that I should remain willfully ignorant about activities that directly affected my professional work and ethical standing demonstrated his assumption that my individual integrity was less important than his family's business interests. The suggestion that seeking truth about harmful business practices constituted disloyalty revealed the extent to which he expected me to subordinate my values to family priorities. Margaret's involvement in addressing our marital conflict included a formal meeting where she presented what she characterized as a final opportunity for me to demonstrate appropriate commitment to family loyalty and social obligation. Her ultimatum required me to cease all community development work that might conflict with family business interests and focus exclusively on supporting David's career advancement through traditional social and charitable activities. The conditions that Margaret outlined for my continued acceptance within the family structure included ending my consulting practice, withdrawing from all professional relationships with rural communities, and dedicating myself to the social obligations that would support David's advancement within the firm. Her expectation that I would abandon my career and professional identity in order to preserve family harmony represented a complete rejection of my individual worth and autonomous decision-making authority. My refusal to accept Margaret's ultimatum precipitated the final breakdown of my relationship with the Hartwell family. David's response to my decision was to suggest that I needed time to reconsider my priorities and understand the consequences of choosing my career over family loyalty. His assumption that I would eventually capitulate to family pressure demonstrated his fundamental misunderstanding of my character and commitment to personal integrity. The divorce proceedings that followed were contentious but ultimately favored my position due to the financial independence I had built through my consulting practice and the careful documentation I had maintained of family business practices that created ethical conflicts. David's expectation that I would be vulnerable to economic pressure during the divorce was undermined by my ability to support myself independently and my willingness to expose family business practices that would not survive public scrutiny. The settlement negotiations revealed the family's concern about potential damage to their reputation if details about their rural development practices became public through extended litigation. Their willingness to provide a generous financial settlement in exchange for confidentiality agreements reflected their recognition that their business model relied on maintaining positive community relationships that could be compromised by negative publicity about displacement and gentrification activities. My decision to accept the divorce settlement was motivated by the opportunity to use the financial resources to expand my community development work and protect the rural communities that were vulnerable to displacement through aggressive development practices. The money provided the foundation for establishing a nonprofit organization that could offer free consulting services to communities that lacked resources to resist harmful development pressure. The years following my divorce were characterized by remarkable professional growth and personal satisfaction, as I built an organization that successfully protected numerous rural communities from exploitative development practices. The consulting work expanded to include legal advocacy, policy development, and community organizing that addressed the systemic issues that made rural areas vulnerable to outside economic manipulation. The irony that emerged 3 years after my divorce was the discovery that the Hartwell family's aggressive expansion strategy had overextended their financial resources and left them vulnerable to the same market pressures that they had used to acquire rural properties at below-market prices. Their development projects had generated substantial debt that required continued property acquisition and sales to maintain cash flow, creating a cycle that became unsustainable when regional economic conditions changed. The financial crisis that affected the Hartwell family business coincided with David's marriage to Jessica Palmer, a woman from their social circle whose background and values aligned perfectly with family expectations. The wedding celebration was elaborate and well-attended, but the family's financial situation was becoming increasingly precarious due to over-leveraged development projects and declining property values in several regional markets. The foreclosure notice that appeared in legal publications regarding the Hartwell family estate represented the culmination of financial decisions that had prioritized short-term profit over long-term sustainability. The generations of accumulated wealth that had supported the family's social position and business activities had been compromised by aggressive development strategies that concentrated too much risk in volatile real estate markets. My decision to attend the foreclosure auction was motivated by the opportunity to acquire the property that had symbolized everything I was told I could never truly possess or understand. The estate that had hosted family gatherings where my background and values were consistently dismissed and minimized was now available to anyone with sufficient cash and courage to participate in the bidding process. The preparation for the auction required careful financial planning and strategic thinking that drew upon all the business skills I had developed through building my consulting practice and nonprofit organization. The purchase would represent the largest financial commitment of my life, but it also offered the opportunity to demonstrate that the values and capabilities that the family had dismissed were sufficient to achieve what they had considered impossible. The auction day arrived with unseasonably warm weather that seemed appropriate for the transformation that was about to occur. I arrived early to inspect the property and review the final bidding procedures, wearing a simple business suit that reflected my professional success without ostentation or apology. The estate looked exactly as I remembered from family gatherings, but my perspective had changed completely from that of an anxious outsider seeking acceptance to that of a confident woman considering a major investment decision. The bidding process attracted several interested parties, including developers who were considering the property for subdivision or commercial conversion. However, my financial preparation and determination to acquire the estate provided advantages that other bidders could not match. The cash offer that I submitted exceeded the minimum requirements by a substantial margin, ensuring that no competing bids could challenge my successful acquisition. The moment when the auctioneer announced my winning bid created a sense of completion and vindication that exceeded anything I had anticipated. The property that had represented everything I was told I could never belong to or truly understand was now legally mine, purchased with money I had earned through work that honored the values and community commitments that the family had found so problematic. Margaret's presence at the auction had been inevitable, though her shock at discovering my successful bid was evident, despite her attempts to maintain composure. Our brief exchange after the auction concluded was civil but pointed, with her expressing surprise at my financial capability and my responding that she had consistently underestimated both my resources and my determination. David's absence from the auction was notable but understandable, given the personal and professional humiliation that the family's financial collapse represented. His new marriage was beginning under circumstances that were dramatically different from the security and social position that had characterized his previous life, requiring adjustments that would test both his character and his relationship with Jessica. The renovation and restoration work that I commissioned for the estate reflected my commitment to honoring the property's historical significance while adapting it for use as a conference center and retreat facility that would serve nonprofit organizations and community development groups. The transformation from private family residence to public service facility represented the complete reversal of everything the property had symbolized during my marriage. The opening celebration for the Hartwell House Community Development Center attracted dozens of rural community leaders, nonprofit professionals, and policy advocates who had benefited from my consulting work over the years. The event demonstrated that the property could serve purposes that were far more meaningful and socially beneficial than private family entertaining and status display. The most satisfying aspect of acquiring and converting the estate was the opportunity to create a permanent resource that would support community development work throughout Virginia and neighboring states. The facility provided meeting spaces, accommodation for visiting advocates, and office facilities for nonprofit organizations that lacked resources for professional development and strategic planning activities. The success of the Community Development Center exceeded my expectations and demonstrated that the business skills and community relationships I had built through my consulting practice could support initiatives that had lasting impact on rural economic development and social justice advocacy. The center became a regional hub for training programs, policy development workshops, and coalition-building activities that strengthened the capacity of grassroots organizations throughout the region. The personal satisfaction that came from converting the symbol of my exclusion into a resource for community empowerment provided closure that was far more meaningful than any revenge or vindication could have offered. The property that had once represented everything I was told I could never truly possess now served communities and values that the Hartwell family had never understood or appreciated. The financial success that enabled my acquisition of the estate also provided resources for expanding community development work into other regions where rural communities faced similar challenges from aggressive development practices and economic exploitation. The nonprofit organization grew to include policy advocacy, legal assistance, and community organizing capabilities that provided comprehensive support for communities seeking to protect their autonomy and sustainability. The letters that I occasionally received from David reflected his ongoing struggles to adjust to changed financial circumstances and social position following the family's business collapse. His attempts to maintain contact suggested both regret about our marriage's failure and recognition that the values I had represented might have provided better guidance for long-term success and personal satisfaction than the family traditions he had chosen to prioritize. The transformation of my life from anxious outsider seeking family acceptance to confident leader serving community empowerment demonstrated that authentic success comes from honoring personal values and building relationships based on mutual respect, rather than social convention or economic advantage. The community development work that the family had dismissed as naive idealism proved more sustainable and socially beneficial than the investment strategies that had seemed so sophisticated and profitable. The legacy that I hope to build through the Community Development Center and the nonprofit organization reflects my commitment to ensuring that other people facing exclusion and marginalization have access to resources and support that can help them build independent success and authentic community relationships. The work continues to evolve and expand, serving communities throughout the region that benefit from professional assistance and advocacy support. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.